Hello, welcome back to the latest episode of You Are My Borough. Myself, Dom Short, and Scott Wilson, both of the Northern Echo. Thanks as ever for joining us, and thank you for all the comments to videos over recent weeks. We really appreciate them. We are going to do another Q&A in the next couple of weeks, so give us we'll give you a heads up ahead of when we're going to do that. It'll might be the back end of next week, but we'll give you a shout in advance. Do subscribe if you haven't already to the channel. If you're listening on your podcast platform, then rate and review on there. Are we doing, Scott, already for a trip to Wembley tonight?
Yes, I'm off down there any second now. Once we've done this, to see the last pre-Euros game. The one at St James's was a non-event on Monday, wasn't it? I strongly suspect tonight's going to be similar. I mean, you just want them not to get injured now, don't you? The squad's near, and we know what's what. Harry Kane hobbling around on half an ankle would not be a good sight a week before the start of the tournament, would it?
You're heading out to the Euros a week after that, which we'll touch on next week when we're doing a vid before you go. But what did you make before we get to Borough? What did you make of the squad announcements this week? Any surprises there?
I thought it was.
I'm surprised by Grealish and Maddison. I thought it was
unusually bold for Southgate. I mean, Maguire's the one that stands out. You know, well, clearly he would have been in the squad if he was fit. I think. You know, we've known all along that England look great up front and potentially suspect at the back. For all that there's arguments about Maguire, and he's been pretty dreadful for most of the season. Without him, it looks a really inexperienced backline now, or at least an inexperienced backline in terms of they've never really played together. And assuming Luke Shaw's not ready for the first game, you know, if that backline is Walker, Stones, Guehi, Trippier, then yeah, okay. The other end, I mean, it was a surprise. I thought Maddison would be in. I thought Grealish might miss out. I mean, I think you can argue that certainly in the second half of the season, neither of them really deserved to be there ahead of an Eze or a Gordon or even a Wharton. So, you know, but that is unusually bold for Southgate. Let's see if his actual team lineup is anything like as bold. I suspect it probably won't be.
You mentioned left back there, which leads us directly into Ryan Giles.
Seamless.
Well, I can't just get away. When you finished for Trippier and then you said we'll move further forward, I'm like, no, don't just stay there. And I'll
just jump in with an even more seamless one. Okay, so I've got two girls who are 13 and 10, and I'd like to say that they're collecting the football stickers for the summer. Strictly speaking, their dad is collecting the football stickers for the summer, and they're kind of being used as a prop to get away with it, right? But unless you know the answer to this, and you might, because it has been knocking around, which left back is in the England team in the sticker album? You know, don't you?
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. So I won't say it. But do you know why?
Yeah, I do.
So it's Luke Thomas.
It's Luke Thomas.
Yeah. So explain why.
So it's a licensing issue, isn't it? In our day, Panini always did the stickers. And up until last year, they've always done the stickers. This time, the license has gone to Topps. So they're doing the stickers. But there's a weird image rights thing where certain players and certain teams, they can't use the proper photos or even any photos of some of them. So for England in particular, I think Portugal's another team. I think France are another team. The stickers don't really marry up to the rest of the stickers in their album. And there's some very obvious absentees and some even more bizarre ones who have been shoved in their place. Luke Thomas being the biggest example.
How is it decided which players can and which players can't?
I don't. All I know is that Panini have retained the rights to some of the images. Right. So that's where the weird thing is. But how on earth they've got to Luke Thomas? I mean, surely. I mean, where would he be on your list of English left backs?
Well, I mean,
that's a left foot, haven't you? You'd be running it close.
As I was writing when he signed in January, he has been on Gareth Southgate's radar in the past. But you know,
anyway, we digress.
I mean, 12 months ago, Ryan Giles on the back of his spell at Boro would have maybe had the look of
ahead of Luke Thomas.
Yeah, moving on into the Premier League and kicking on. It didn't work out like that. Giles went to Luton. I think he played 5 Premier League. He started the first 3 games and then would only make 2 more Premier League appearances. Went to Hull on loan in January. Now, this is where things get slightly confused and complicated. when Hull signed him in January, their official announcement was that they had an option to make that deal permanent in the summer. It's since been strongly reported, and the strong suggestions are from some quarters that that's an obligation rather than an option. Hull are said to be in talks with Luton now over whether that deal will be made permanent for a fee reported to be £4 million. Now, this is where Boro come in. Boro, we understand it, and monitoring the situation there. And even if Giles goes to Hull, they'll continue to monitor the situation. There's still a possibility that they think that Giles might possibly be made available down the line. We'll get to that. We'll get to how that might be the case. Why Hull would sign him this summer and then he might still be made available. But just in general, to start with, Scott, what do you make of it?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I mean, on social media, I think it's probably split fans down the middle with some thinking, yeah, get him back. It was brilliant for us. Yes, he's had a rocky season, but if we can get him to anything like that, he's better than what we've got. And others saying, we've got 2 left backs. There's priorities in other areas of the field. Why on earth are Boro looking at this? I think the answer to that is that left back is not at Boro's, on the top of Boro's priority list this summer. They know they need a striker. They know they need a wide attacking player. They know they need a central midfielder. They're the priorities. That said, I think they're looking at the left back position and thinking, okay, Engel's come in. He's done okay. Bangura's come in, he's looked good, but he hasn't been able to stay fit. Is there a possibility to improve that area? And is it an area that, while it might not be a priority, is something that we're going to be looking at? Well, the answer is yes, as far as we're aware. And I think the Giles interest stems primarily from the fact that this time last year, Boro were going all in to try and sign Ryan Giles, and we're going to potentially commit quite a lot of money to that. It didn't happen. Luton committed more. This summer, there is the potential, and as we're going to talk about, it's really no more than the potential at the minute, but there's the potential to get Ryan Giles for an awful lot less than you were thinking you were going to have to pay for him this time last year. And so I think that's just perked Boro's interest to think, well, look, if we are going to do something at left back, it's not something we want to throw a shed load of money at. It's not a massive priority, but it's something we could look to do. And if we can get Ryan Giles for way less than we thought we were going to be paying last summer, that's a good deal. And I think that's really where we're at with it, isn't it?
And again, our understanding is that Boro's preference would be an initial loan with a view to be made permanent down the line. Now, on the online and in the paper today, we've got some quotes from Kieran Scott on the loan situation where he's saying, yeah, we're open. We're looking at the loan market. We're open to bringing in loan players, but we'll only do deals like we did in the most recent season with Sam Greenwood, Luke Thomas, where Luke Ayling in January, where you're bringing them in with a view to with a deal in place to make them permanent if you wish. Whereas the year before, obviously we know Cameron Archer, Ryan Giles, Aaron Ramsey, Zach Steffen. Like as Scott said in his quote, you're bringing in players you're bringing in Premier League clubs' best youngest players just to give them the experience of playing football. Yeah. We've got 5 years left on the deal and they're heading back. So that would be Boro's preference. Now, if he was to go to Hull, the obvious question would be why would Hull sign someone for £4 million and then let him go to a rival? Well, I think there's a few things to consider here, isn't it? First of all, if it is an obligation, that deal was done in January when Liam Rosenior was the boss. Although Rosenior was a big fan of Giles, I think Giles only started 1 of the last 7 games, didn't start any of the last 6 games. Rosenior's now obviously gone. Tim Walter's come in. So as things stand, we don't know kind of what Walter's preferences and priorities are going to be when he looks at his squad. And the other thing to bear in mind with Hull is FFP. The owner talked about it this week at Walter's unveiling. I think he said about how he was only going to be able to spend 14 or 15 million pounds this summer, as well as bringing in loan players. But clearly there was an admission there that they might be hamstrung and therefore they might have to trade. And again, that potentially might. These are all just maybes, but potentially might open the door.
Well, the FFP thing is the key to this, I think, because Hull are in a fairly delicate situation, as the owner said. You know, he wants to pump in money, and as Boro, as is the case with Boro, he's got priorities in other areas of the pitch other than left back. Now, I think how can Boro get Giles? There's probably two ways that this could happen. One is that Hull, at the moment, are negotiating with Luton to try and drive down what they actually will end up paying for Giles. Now, that, if there's an obligation to buy, if everything had been set in stone, then there's no negotiations to be done. That's already been done. So the fact that everybody, including from the Hull end, seem to be saying that there's talks ongoing over this, suggests that there's a possibility that actually they don't really want to sign Giles for the money that was being talked about initially, in which case clearly there's a potential window there for Boro to go in and do their own deal with Luton. The second option is that Hull do sign Giles, but actually end up paying more than they wanted and are committed to a lot more wages than they ideally wanted, and so would then be open to the possibility of immediately loaning him back out. Now, as you say, on the face of it, that sounds weird, but I think as we're going to see in the Premier League before the end of this month, when clubs are desperately trying to offload players before the PSR deadline in the Premier League, what FFP and PSR makes you do it kind of forces you to do some pretty weird deals potentially, just because you have to tick the box in terms of the finances. So it feels like there's an awful lot of hoops Boro are going to jump through, and it feels like this is a deal that's going to be really difficult to do. But to a certain extent, it's a bit of a no-lose for Boro, because I've been trying to say, it's almost being seen as a bonus deal. So if they can get it over the line, great. If they can't, fine. They haven't lost anything. Move on to a different left-back target further down the window, potentially, when you know how much money you've got left once you've done your priority deals. I think that's where we're at with it. It's a we'd like to do this if it's at all possible, but we're seeing it as a bit of a bonus rather than priority number 1, 2, or 3.
And just last couple, just kind of stepping ahead, and those hoops have been jumped through, and Giles was to sign, hypothetically. It'd be interesting how Boro had set up, wouldn't it? Because we know how Giles played, how Boro played, how offensive Giles was down that left side. Now at that stage, Boro had Tommy Smith at right back, who took in, who was kind of a bit more solid and defensive minded. Now, obviously, Luke Ayling's come in, who got 8 assists of his own in 11 games last season, likes to bomb on. Be interesting, hypothetically, to see how that dynamic would work, wouldn't it?
Would. Yeah, it would. And it'd be interesting as well to see quite whether Giles is still the player he was, because, he has had a season where it's just gone wrong for him, hasn't it? Like you say, disaster at Luton, went to Hull, played a bit of football, but by the end of the season was having niggles and didn't seem to be Rosenior's number 1, even though there wasn't an awful lot out there. So, where is Ryan Giles at in terms of his level of play, and where's his head at and all of that? I think that would be interesting to see as well. If Boro can get Ryan Giles back to the levels he was playing at for most of that season 2 seasons ago, then for me, he's definitely an upgrade on Engel, and he's an upgrade on what we've seen so far from Bangura, with the caveat that Bangura could still be a lot better than we've seen of him because of the injuries. I think it'd be a massive addition to the squad. But there is that little bit of a question mark there over what 12 months that haven't really gone right for him of kind of, has that left its mark?
Yeah, and it feels like, regardless of whether it's Boro or what happens, it feels like a big summer and a big move for Giles, this, doesn't it? Because he's 24 now. Last year we were saying this. He had to leave Wolves. He had to kick on. He went to Luton. It didn't work. He's not a young player anymore, is he? He needs to now find his feet at a club, a permanent club, establish himself there and kick on.
Yeah, because we joked about it at the start, but if Ryan Giles had a really good season in the Premier League, whether with Luton or with Wolves, then like Tyrick Mitchell at Palace, he would have been knocking on the door for this England squad. There's a massive gap there at left back. But clearly he's a million miles away from the conversation at the minute. So you're right. He needs to be playing regular football. And it feels like it needs to either be in the bottom end of the Premier League, which is very unlikely given the way things have gone, or more likely for a team that's genuinely challenging for promotion at the top end of the Championship. I guess you would say at the moment, that's exactly where both Boro and Hull want to be.
And last one at left back, this absolutely isn't Boro writing off. I know we've touched on it, Lucas Engel or Alex Bangura. Just to go over both. Obviously, Engel, we know, had that difficult start, then really found his feet and impressed, and then probably plateaued a bit and was just okay, really, wasn't he, in the final months of the season. Bangura's the big unknown because obviously the injuries, and we haven't seen him with a prolonged spell in the side, but I think he's exciting, isn't he? I think he's exciting at left back, and I think we've seen real flashes of promise there. And it's probably worth remembering that last year was their first season in the Championship. In a difficult season for Boro, of kind of such turbulence at times that Michael Carrick's talked about, both players, you would imagine, will be backing themselves fully fit through pre-season with that experience behind them on and off the pitch to really kick on next year.
Yeah, and I think Boro know what they can get from Engel. I think they know that he's a steady away Championship left back. He'll make attacking runs, but he's not going to be the kind of real creator that Giles was 2 seasons ago. But you can make the argument that he's already defensively more secure than Giles, and he's looked at times. Bangura, I think, excites Boro a little bit more because I think he has got that explosive overlapping potential. But as you say, he hasn't played regularly enough in the Championship to know whether he can actually do it at this level week in, week out. But I think Boro are excited about it. But I certainly don't think this interest in Giles is a case of, a black mark against Bangura. It's absolutely not. I think they are excited about what he can offer. But with the caveat that he's had a lot of injuries and therefore he hasn't really been able to actually prove that he's at the level that they would want him to be.
Just staying down that left side, Riley McGree has done an interview in Australia, a brief interview in Australia this week. Australia are playing, they've got 2 World Cup qualifiers. I think they played against Bangladesh on Thursday, play Palestine next week. McGree isn't involved because he'd had the surgery on his foot ankle injury at the back end of the season. But all the suggestions were that he's going to be fully fit for the start of pre-season. That was the suggestion with all of the players who were out injured at the end of the year. Obviously, McGree's moving in the last 12 months of his contract and was asked about that. He said, every season is important. I'm going out there as I would any season, whether that be with Middlesbrough again or elsewhere. I have to say, I love the club and the people there. Watch that space as the summer progresses, because as we've touched on in previous videos, clearly it feels like there needs to be a resolution one way or another before the end of the transfer window, with him moving into the last 12 months of his contract.
Yeah, I think Boro will want to know where they stand, because I think, the kind of new regime, if you like, or the new way of running things seems to be very, very firm on, we don't want players walking out the door at the end of their contracts or going into the last 6 months of their contracts if it's not on our terms. And it clearly wouldn't be with McGree, you know what I mean? That there's a valuable asset there. So, yeah, I think Boro will want to. I think it will have to happen one way or the other. If Riley McGree isn't going to sign a contract, or they're just an absolute loggerheads, and we do know there have been discussions. So, this has been rumbling on, and it has, to a certain degree, hit some kind of an impasse. I think unless that is resolved, then Boro will be thinking very, very seriously about selling McGree, because financially it just makes no sense at all to let him get into the last 6 months or potentially right to the end of his contract, without him staying on beyond that. So it's a big summer for McGree, I think, because, he was an absolute key player probably, 12, 18 months ago, but he was very in and out last season, largely because of the injury situation. We know Boro are looking at bringing in another left-sided attacking player who he's going to have to compete with. There's a chance Finn Azaz moves over there if Boro bringing in number 10, which is even more competition. So it feels like a big summer for McGree. He's going to have a decision to make there. And I think Boro will feel that they are okay either way. I don't see this as a scenario where Boro will suddenly start throwing a load of money at Riley McGree if there's a big gap between what McGree and his party are wanting and what Boro are offering, which you would kind of assume there is, hence why the deal hasn't happened so far. I think Boro will look at it and say, this is our negotiating position. If you want to come on board with that, that's great. If not, then actually we've got options there. We're going to make signings of our own there. Maybe the time's right. I don't know, but I can't imagine that Boro are going to throw. I think Boro will stand firm on their negotiating position.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, for all McGree has clearly been a big player when fit for Michael Carrick's Boro. He only started 14 games last season. And this feels like this clearly is a big summer for him on the back of a disappointing season. And as you said there, we know that Boro want a striker, we know that Boro want a midfielder this summer, and we know they want a versatile forward player who can play at number 10. Now, if you're bringing someone in who can play at number 10, what's the plan there with Finn Azaz? Is it move out to the left? Now, clearly that doesn't change things for McGree significantly, because Boro would want a couple of strong options in every position anyway. They're not going to be wanting to go into a season with only one left-sided player or one right-sided player. You look at the right, you've got Force and Jones. So you'd want a couple of players, 2, 3, 4 players who can jostle it out for those left side and number 10 roles. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. Pre-season confirmation.
Yeah.
The Afonso Alves derby, a trip to Harrogate. I wouldn't mind boxing that. Have you done Harrogate?
Yeah, I've done Harrogate a few times.
Well, I've never done Harrogate.
Yeah. No, I've done Harrogate a few times. Yeah, I think Sunderland pre-season probably. I actually did Harrogate in the years way back before I was at the Echo. I used to work at the Evening Post in Leeds, and Harrogate was kind of fringy for them. But they played when they were a non-league team. I think they played Bristol Rovers in the first round of the FA Cup. I remember doing that. Yeah, nice little trip to Harrogate. Yeah, lovely. Bishop, the glamour of Bishop.
Yeah, Bishop for Bolton.
Bishop for Bolton, obviously.
Yes, yeah. Gateshead, Doncaster, Harrogate, and Heerenveen. It's and obviously there's a trip to Portugal in there before that. I think the suggestion is Boro are going to play a game there, but it'll be behind closed doors as it was last year. No real surprises in there, is there?
No, I mean, from the positive point of view, there's a number of very handy games there for fans. You know, if you want to, you can tick off all of those pre-season games really quite easily without too much fuss. I guess the one maybe disappointment from fans is that there isn't a bit more of a proper away day, a trip up to Scotland maybe, or Cornwall, or, you know, somewhere that's a little bit different. You know, normally I think fans like a bit of that in pre-season, but having said that, you know, pre-season serves its job, doesn't it? It seems a pretty decent mix in terms of the standard of the opposition and the type of games. Heerenveen at home, weekend before the start of the season, you'd like to think there's maybe a couple of new signings in amongst that, and you know, we'll start to get a look at the team Carrick wants to play for that first game of the season. And obviously, you know, we're not a million miles away now from the fixtures coming out, are we? What are we? Another couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, I think, actually, maybe for the championship. But yeah, so it's, you know, it's starting to come together, and yeah, we'll split those up and have a couple of little jaunts, Dom.
Bishop to start. I remember seeing Uche Piezu score. Absolute belter.
Worldy.
Will that have been on his debut?
I think it might have been his first game. Yeah, I think it might have been his first game.
That'll be good, because Bolton will bring a few, won't they? For that, you would.
Yeah, I would have thought so. And, I would have thought.
I think you've got a good crowd there. That'll be a good start.
Yeah, I would think so. And then
and Heerenveen, obviously, there's the obvious Afonso Alves link, but Robin van Persie's the gaffer there.
Yeah, which is an interesting one, isn't it? I actually saw Newcastle play a UEFA Cup game in Heerenveen. I've got the top upstairs. You know, it's like a blue and white stripes with the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gets a run out on a 7-a-side at Northallerton Leisure Centre every now and then. So,
talking of run outs, you had one this week.
I did. Yeah. So Newcastle, bless them, do like as a thank you to their media department, they let them play a game at St. James's Park, and they invite the kind of press to make up the numbers. So yeah, I had an hour run around at St. James's, which was quite an experience. I know Boro kind of, the Red Faction lads play at Boro, don't they? They played at the Riverside. I know one of the lads lives near us in the village, and he's never stopped shouting about the fact that he scored at the Riverside. I didn't score at St. James's, don't worry. I had one shot from about 25 yards. I was playing centre half, in fairness, but I had one shot from about 25 yards that literally ended up halfway up the Gallagher end. So,
if there was a Boro equivalent, it'd just be a bum fight to get Maddo on the team, wouldn't it? Then the rest of us would have a right hack around for 90 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, Maddo would tower head and shoulders above everyone.
Oh, God, yeah.
I suspect Rob Law is quite fit. I don't know if he'd be a footballer, but I suspect from the tees ranks, Rob's quite fit. He'd be able to run around. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure of his football levels.
And I know from my previous years that Anthony Vickers likes a tackle.
Yes. Yeah. Vic would be chewy, wouldn't he? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Vic will be chewy. Yeah.
Vic and Craig.
I think me and you holding our own. Where would
Vic and Craig at centre half. Vic and Craig at centre half. You see, I'd like to put myself at number 10, but can you afford such a loyalty in a scrap around like that? You've got to play 4-4-2, haven't you? We can't be going in.
You've got to play 4-4-2. Well, I'll tell you what. You play number 10. I'll sit. We'll form the midfield alliance. You can form on, and I'll sit.
You give me the license to roam.
If any of the Boro Press lads, and I know they occasionally do watch our stuff, so if any of you are watching this, get that sorted for next year. Pay-per-view. It'll make you a fortune.
On that note, we'll wrap up. Safe travels to London for the game tonight. We'll be back next week. We'll do a live Q&A ahead of the transfer window opening. So, as I said, keep an eye on the Twitters, on our Twitters. We'll shout up on there, and we'll let you know in the comments of this video as well when it's going to be. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're listening on your podcasts platforms, enjoy your weekend. We'll speak again next week. Take care.